So Donald Trump has shaken up the immigration world here in America. There's so many questions. Our community is uh, communicating a lot of fear, and so we want to help you guys out. We're going to be doing an amazing conversation and live session breaking down the immigration changes, the executive orders, visa interviews, everything that's going to help you guys thrive and succeed. Immigration is the hot topic, one of the big things that Trump campaigned on, and we want to help you out. So get ready, strap in, because this is going to be a great conversation. But we want to welcome you guys. I'm Rob with Chai and Coaching. Chai and Coaching, we're all about helping you thrive and succeed in your cross cultural journey. I actually lived and worked in India for 8 years. I've been blessed and lucky to have been to about 30 different countries around the world. So I love culture. I love travel. I know what it's like to go abroad. And we're here to help you guys out in your abroad journeys. And we've got an awesome guest who maybe you recognize is our friend Mandy. So, Mandy, welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Rob. I'm really excited for today's webinar today. So, my background, if you haven't seen any of my videos before or my conversations with Rob, I'm a former US diplomat and former consular officer. As a visa officer working for the State Department for over 7 years, I interviewed over 100,000 visa applicants. To date, I don't know anybody who's interviewed as many people as I have, and then left to kind of help people on the other side really conquer this process. I'm also a licensed immigration attorney in California. And this is really important because you really want to work with credible people who can help you through the visa and immigration process, and not everybody can do that. And so my partner and I, after leaving the government, my partner Travis also was a visa officer. We have really dedicated our careers to helping foreign nationals like yourselves uh, really prepare and strategize so that you can succeed in the visa interview process. And so today is going to be a really interesting topic. I think Rob and I had a couple of sessions before Trump came in for his second term, talking about what are the things that could happen. It hasn't been that long, but there's been a lot of things that have happened. So happy to dive into it today so you guys can plan out what your journeys will look like.
Definitely. Sorry, I'm changing my camera there. I was using my wrong camera. But yeah, friends, I know this last few weeks, I mean, it hasn't even been a month since Trump was inaugurated. And I feel like the immigration world has been turned upside down. So that's why we're doing these sessions to help you guys out. We will do Q&A for about the last 30 minutes. So we're going to bring your questions on the screen, answer them directly. So stay tuned for that. Save your questions if you can. Till then, feel free to interact in the chat and make some friends and share your journey. But we'll address those questions in about 20, 30 minutes. And then also something fun that we're going to do is a giveaway. So Mandy and our friends at Zia Visa have some really cool online courses for F1 visa, tourist visa. We're going to give away one of those courses for free, about a $300 value. So stay tuned for the giveaway. That's going to be a lot of fun as well. So, but first, we want to know where you guys are tuning in from. Mandy's there in California. I'm here in Texas. But where are you guys watching from? Let us know in the comments. Love to see where our amazing audience is today. If you're watching the replay later on, again, replay fam, let us know where you guys are tuning in from. So, okay, let's see here. We got Iran. Welcome. Where else are you guys watching from? Ooh, Tanzania. Very cool. Cairo, Egypt. Awesome. Ethiopia, Nigeria. Awesome. Welcome, friends. Where else are you guys tuning in from today? With also India. Very cool. Got a very diverse audience this morning here. Some more
Yeah, it's
India.
it's so cool, Rob, to see people tune in from all over the world and just, filming a session from the office, being able to connect to people from all over the world, I think still never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah. Well, welcome, friends. Again, keep sharing in the comments where you're watching from. If you have a friend who's preparing for a visa interview, share the link so they can join as well. We want to help them out, especially for that live Q&A part. So invite your friends to join this conversation as well. But the first thing we're going to jump in with, some news article headlines. I said that Trump did more in his first 100 hours than most presidents have done in their first 100 days. He was busy signing executive order after executive order. I think the news stations couldn't even keep up with all the things that have been going on. But a lot of these executive orders, which is things that the president says, hey, we're making these things happen, were related to immigration. So, Mandy, let's break down some of Trump's immigration executive orders and other things
Yeah.
he's proposing and really wanting to focus on at the beginning of his term here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think President Trump is definitely moving a lot faster. The second time around, the first time he didn't really have much of an understanding of the federal government. And so I think now that he's been around the block once, he knows exactly what he wants to get done. And he really campaigned on some issues for immigration. So,
Hmm.
one thing that he's been sort of shouting from the rooftops is that he wants an increased deportation of migrants. And so the White House press secretary, like within the first week of his term, was sharing images of deportation flights being carried out by, the U.S. military cargo planes. And, I think the statistic they had was that on his fourth day in office, they had 1,000 people who were removed or repatriated. And this change has really caused a lot of, you know, um, you can say backlash, but just it's been crazy around the world. There was a diplomatic spat with Colombia, which I'm sure you've all heard about, where
Hmm.
Colombia's government basically barred the planes from the deportation flights from landing. But later they agreed to accept the flights because Trump threatened them with punitive tariffs. So the US still has a lot of power in deciding, who gets to stay and who has to leave. Something else that he campaigned about and immediately tried to put into action is a vow to end birthright citizenship. So, birthright citizenship is when someone is born in the United States, they're automatically a US citizen. And so there's lots of legal battles to whether or not Trump can achieve this, and it's already been kind of
Hmm.
shut down by the courts. But he's definitely pushing, and he's pushing the boundaries on this. Um, there's also been a deployment by the Pentagon of 1,500 active duty troops to the southern U.S. border. It's all about keeping that border firm. And so that's an increase of 60% of military personnel in the area just to kind of manage things. And they've suspended the entry of all undocumented migrants to the US. And the CBP has actually been instructed to turn people away without granting them asylum hearings, which is pretty unprecedented because usually people at least have a right to make a case why
Hmm.
they're fleeing their countries and why they're in fear. So he's also made it a point to cancel existing migrants' appointments by getting rid of the CBP One like smartphone app. So previously, people who came to the US were able to schedule appointments with US Border Patrol to be heard. Now that's no longer a thing. And so there are people who have been waiting for, possibly years for these appointments. All of a sudden, they don't have them anymore. And there's just really been, I think, in my community as an immigration attorney and also with my friends in the government and consular officers, there's just been a huge expansion of the powers of customs and ICE officials. So that's basically immigration enforcement and carrying out raids. I don't know what you've heard, Rob, but in my circles, we've heard of ICE agents basically, going to schools, uh, questioning children, and when their parents come, if they're not in status, then they get deported and put into
Hmm.
deportation proceedings. And so I think that we're really seeing this. There's a lot of fear right now for people whose visa status are at risk. And this is also, just to point this out, this is not just for people who are in the US without status. What I have heard within the first month is that they're basically empowering these immigration, customs, law enforcement officials to be able to question anybody. And, even people who are legally in status in the US, you might be on an H-1B visa, you might have already, applied for a change of status or applied to adjust status. But if they intimidate you and say, hey, can you come with me, please? Some of it is really dependent on whether or not that person knows their rights and whether or not they
Hmm.
kind of play into that fear. And if they're like, okay, I'll go with you, officer, because you want to be nice, you don't want to
Hmm.
you don't want to jeopardize anything. So I can totally understand why foreign nationals would do that, but just know that this is a really important time to understand your rights. You don't have to go with someone if they don't have a warrant. You don't have to be intimidated by a law
Hmm.
enforcement official just because they tell you to go with them. And then you could very easily be mistaken as someone without status and be put into a situation that doesn't even apply to you, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, anywhere you travel in the world, you're responsible for understanding your visa status, your rights. Anytime I went somewhere else in the world, it was my job to know the ins and outs of my visa and how to abide by that. And same as in America.
Hmm.
So make sure you do your research. You know, you're getting trusted sources. I know there's a lot that goes online and TikTok and stuff, so be careful about just listening and following anything there. Um, but I know we shouldn't be totally surprised. These are things that Trump campaigned on, to
Yep.
close the border and stop the flow there, and especially to target those who've crossed over illegally, those who are committing crimes. Seems like it's also not just focusing on criminals, but it seems like just people who are here not on a valid visa status have also been deported as well. There was recently the big flight that went to India, that took about 100 people back to India. So yeah, it's full force. Trump is definitely trying to live up to what he promised. And I think some people are maybe more shocked to think that he's really doing that, but there's implications. And so um, it's really important to understand how the legal system works, the visa process, government systems, and the rights and help you can get and resources that are available to you guys so you're not confused or in the wrong situation or anything.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. I think, I'm usually someone who tries to take a very neutral stance because you never know what's going to happen. So, there's
Mhm.
no point in worrying about things that couldn't happen. But I think in this administration, really anything could happen. And we've seen, you know, entire US agencies be shut down within like 20 days, which you never would have thought would be possible because even though the US government has been in the past slow to respond to certain things, slow to implement new things, part of the bureaucracy, but there's also a lot of stability and a lot of safeguards in that type of process, which can't just be changed by one person. And I
Yeah.
think we've sort of moved into a new world where, yes, things can be shut down or, new policy drafted. And perhaps it may not be constitutional, but they're waiting to see if the courts will actually check the executive power
Mhm.
on that. So I think for our purposes, for everyone in this webinar, it's just really important to know that the process is going to be harder, right? It's going to be harder. It already is harder, but I think we're trending in that direction where visa interviews will be tougher, wait times will be longer because one of the priorities of Trump is to not make it easy for people to immigrate. He's making immigration a priority, but not in the way that you would want. He's trying to limit everything, he's trying to get less people to come here. And I think, working in this industry, I think that's really sad because, we
Mhm.
want people to come here with their talents and with their ideas and to help make this country better. And so, I'm committed to helping you guys understand this process better, helping you guys navigate it better, because, I don't want immigration to stop. I think that this is one of the best parts of the US is that it is such a melting pot and there's so many different people bringing their food and their ideas and their talents to the US. And you should not try to, you should not stop wanting to come here just because of what's happening in the government.
Yeah, and I'll say that we shouldn't give up all hope. I know that the thumbnail of this is, no more immigrants, and that can seem like that's Trump's position, but Trump's surrounded himself with very different people this time, and we can maybe have some hope because people like Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, all the tech giant CEOs were at Trump's inauguration, and they need you guys. They need H-1Bs, L-1s, O-1s, EB-1s. They need skilled talent labor. Otherwise, these companies don't exist. So, there are people in the inner circle of Trump that want you guys here and are going to fight for you guys, especially international students, professionals, educators. So yeah, it's not all hope is lost. We have a glimmer of hope, but it's interesting to see how all this kind of shakes down, and some of it's still to be determined.
Yeah, I think
But
that's such a good point, Rob, that, they do, they're big supporters of the H-1B program. And so if you're someone in that process or hoping to win the
Mhm.
H-1B lottery, keep your eye on the news. Maybe they'll expand it. We don't know.
Yeah, yeah, and we're planning to do some H-1B content soon, another live session in a couple weeks about H-1B lottery, so stay tuned for that, friends. That's gonna help out because there's been some big H-1B changes. But let's talk about visa interviews. I know a lot of you guys tune in to learn and get help. Mandy is a visa interview expert. So what kind of impact changes do we need to consider for visa interviews in 2025?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, as I mentioned, because Trump is taking such a tough stance on immigration and visas in general, what I think will happen is that this is going to impact the visa interview. And you can expect that visa officers working in this environment will become tougher under Trump. It's not like they're going to completely, change the process at all. It's just that the standards are going to become higher, and it's going to be a higher hurdle to overcome whether or not you qualify for a visa. And this is because I think visa officers, they usually will feel empowered based on the rhetoric that is coming out of the White House. You know,
Mhm.
if if it's a president that is coming in and being like, "Oh, we want as many students to come study here as possible," then the visa officers kind of take that in stride, and they're like, "Okay, like we want to make sure that we're really good to our student visa applicants this year, make sure we're giving them the time to properly explain, maybe making it a little bit easier for them to pass because a lot of students don't have ties, as strong of ties to their home country. We're going to let that slide and we're going to go ahead and approve them." Under Trump, because the rhetoric has been so, we don't want people to come here. It's there's a balance. They want professionals coming here. When you're coming in on a student visa, I think you're at the very front end of that process. But I think visa officers will take the general attitude of the White House and be like, okay, we're going to be tough on visas. We're going to be tough on immigration. And so they will likely make it tougher on the visa interview. And that might just mean, giving you even less time to explain yourself. Maybe the first thing that you say that they don't like, they decide that, okay, the visa interview is over. I've heard everything I need to know. I'm going to just deny this visa because it's so much easier than trying to figure out exactly what's going on and approving the visa, which takes longer, right? So to a visa officer, it doesn't really matter whether they approve or deny, it's all the same to them. And so really the burden is always going to be on you to make sure you're managing your process appropriately, you're understanding what you're walking into, you're understanding exactly what will happen at the interview, what questions will come up, how will you answer the first question, how will you answer the second question, how will you answer the question, if you've been denied before, has anything changed since your last visa interview? So all of
Mhm.
these things I think come into sharper focus because uh, it's just going to be a tougher process in general. And so now more than ever, I recommend that you definitely prepare and have even a basic understanding of what the visa interview is, because it's definitely not a rubber stamp, and it's going to be hard for you to just walk in and expect that everything will work out
Mhm.
without
Yeah.
preparation.
And I wonder if one trickle down effect we might see with visa interviews is, a big focus is trying to reduce government size, reduce spending, You know,
Yes.
people are getting laid off or given opportunities to resign.
Yeah.
So that could happen in these different immigration offices for visa officers. So there's a potential of less staff, less resources
Yes.
um, in the future or near future, which would result in longer wait times. So if
Yes.
you've got to do a visa interview, plan ahead. Don't
Yes.
wait till the last minute because it could be taking longer in the future. So you don't want to get
Mhm.
caught in these kind of reductions of government workforce and then you having to wait longer and miss an opportunity for something.
I think that's such a good point, Rob. You know, a lot of so basically, Trump has made an offer to federal employees to say, you know, if you want to retire now or leave government service, we will pay you out through, I think it was October
September. Yeah.
or September, and you don't even have to come into work. And so a lot of people have considered that offer, but if they don't take it, there might still be a reduction in force, which means that, you know, they're going to be laying people off, fewer visa officers, longer appointment wait times. So I think while this process shakes out, you know, if you've been thinking about applying for a US visa, especially if you're applying for a visitor visa, like for tourism or for business,
Hmm.
usually depending on the reciprocity schedule with your home country, you can get a visa for 10 years. So if you have any plans to travel to the US at all within the next few years, I would say apply now before they reduce the workforce and make it harder for you to get a visa appointment. And because
Hmm.
you get those visas for so long, it's just good to have it just in case you need to go instead of, you know, being stuck in like a year backlog for an appointment.
Yeah. The sooner the better. Remember, student visas F1, you can you do your visa interview a whole year now before your college start date. So don't wait till a couple months before. You know, if you're coming this fall, do your visa interview now and get it over with. It's not going to hurt you. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
a-
Great
all
point.
right. Because of all the change and the storm and avalanche of executive orders, I think there's a lot of rumors, myths floating around. What are some things that we can address to bring clarity and kind of maybe take some false rumors and prove some things true for our friends when it comes to immigration and visas, Mandy?
Yeah. So I think, you know, I've heard this a while back that people were worried that, you know, once Trump comes in with this new administration, that, you know, they're basically going to put in their own people who are going to be really tough on the visa interviews. And that actually doesn't happen. So when the administration switches over, it's still the same visa officers doing the work. Nothing has really changed except for perhaps at the very top levels, you know, higher members of cabinet. But in terms of the people making these decisions on your visa interviews, they're still the same, although they could take a different approach or a different attitude as, you know, we get further into Trump's term. So that is one thing. Definitely the same visa officers. You don't have to worry about that. Another rumor that I heard was people were worried that Trump was just going to shut down visa processing altogether. And that obviously is not going to happen. We, you know, there are so many people who visit the US regularly for business. It would be really detrimental to the US economy to not allow visa processing to happen. However, there is talks of US consulates closing down, and
Mm.
that might happen just to kind of cut costs. And again, how that will impact you is fewer places to interview. People who would normally interview at a consulate that is planning to be shut down might have to be rerouted to go somewhere else, and the lines are going to be longer. So that is actually true, and we're still waiting to see, you know, which consulates are going to be affected. I think there was a couple of the smaller consulates in Europe, like in Germany, that they're going to close down. Like I can't remember exactly which one it was, but it's all still kind of in like in the rumor stage at this point. But I know
Hmm.
that they're making these plans. And then the other thing is a lot of the things that I read in the news that I would have thought a few months ago would be rumors are not actually rumors. You know, so all of
Okay.
the actions that Trump has taken, like, oh, you know, the school is getting raided, or somebody holding an H-1B visa was just approached by an ICE agent on the sidewalk and asked if they could like go with them back to their offices and, you know, start deportation proceedings. Like, there's actually a lot of truth in kind of the scarier stories that you'll hear. So what I will say is that this is a time to be really careful about your visa status. Make sure all of your paperwork is in order. Make sure that you're never out of visa status ever. And make sure that you have a plan moving forward. You know, if you're coming in on this type of visa, but you're eventually hoping to transition or adjust status to a different type of visa, speak with, a knowledgeable immigration attorney about what your options are. Now is a good time to come up with a plan, just so that you're prepared for whatever might come down the pipeline.
Yeah, and I think one rumor that commonly gets talked about is quotas with visa interviews, whether it's a quota of so many they have to reject in a day or approve in a day. And I think people might think, now that Trump's in charge, they're going to have to reject so many people a day. Mandy, are there quotas with visa interviews?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are no quotas with visa interviews. When I was a visa officer, there was definitely no order like, okay, you have to reject a certain percentage of people or a certain number. And in fact, if you were someone that denied too many people, let's just say the rest of the visa officers are denying about 20% of visa applicants and you're denying 50%, you're likely to get a talking to by your manager to talk about, what your process for your decision making is. So they really try to they call it visa norming, which is keeping all of the visa officers on the same page so that no matter which window you go to, which visa officer you get, you're more or less likely to get the same outcome.
Hmm.
Definitely no quotas on approvals or denials. And I hope that continues because that would be really difficult, right? If you're saying a certain number have to be denied, that doesn't make any sense because this is a process that really depends on a person's individual situation as to whether or not they qualify.
Yeah, because I've seen a couple of comments in the chat, saying, "Hey, in this country, everyone's getting rejected or no one has a chance." They just feel like there's a bias to a certain consulate or place. I don't know if that's true, but there's definitely, people feeling that
Yeah,
from certain places. I
yeah.
don't know if it is fair across or if there is more leniency or more strictness when it comes to
Hmm.
visa interviews, depending on location. Any thoughts on that,
Yeah,
Mandy?
yeah. So the approval or denial percentages is very dependent on where you're from. And
Okay.
actually, the State Department has these statistics that are actually very open. If you go to their website or you just Google State Department NIV statistics, you'll find a lot of information on what percentage of people are getting approved or denied in a country. And the way that it works is that generally, when a visa officer goes to a country to work, there's already a culture surrounding that process understood by the visa officers already working there. And how they get these perceptions is by doing something called validation studies. So a visa officer may do a validation study and decide, okay, I'm going to do a study on the last 5 years for every single B1, B2 visitor visa that we've approved in this location. And let's see how many of those people have actually returned to their home country. And so once they pull up that data and run the statistics, that gives them an informed decision. Let's just say that out of the people, it's like 5,000 people that they've approved visitor visas for, 4,900 people have not returned, even though at the interview, they've made it very clear that, once they finish with their purpose of travel, they're coming back to their home country. Well, that basically tells the visa officer that somebody's not being honest or there's a real problem with how they're making these decisions and they're going to clamp down and make it really difficult for you to be approved a visa. And so that's
Mhm.
why you see in some countries the visa denial rate is as low as 5% or 10%, and then in other countries it's as high as 80% or 90%. It's because they do these studies. And so I know for some of you, it feels really unfortunate. Maybe you have never been dishonest and you just really need to go to the US for a conference or, to study. but just keep in mind that the visa officer only has a few minutes with you, and so they don't really know which people are really going to come back. And so they kind of just take the population as a whole from that country, and try to do the best they can to make that determination.
Yeah. So in a little bit, we're going to share some more practical tips and then get into our giveaway and Q&A. But first, friends, if this has been helpful so far, hit that like button. It's Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. So give some love to Mandy for hanging out with us, sharing her expertise. So hit that like button to say thanks, give her a cheers. And the chai question for our amazing audience today is, what visa are you guys preparing for? So go ahead in the comments. We'd love to see which visa you're in the process for, you're prepping for, which visa you got an interview. So yeah, let us know in the comments which visa. We got F2, okay, spouse visa, great. What
Mhm.
else? Let us know your visas. Maybe you guys could connect with some other people who have similar visas, learn from each other. F1, I know we're going to have a lot of F1 students. We got some B1, B2, EB3, tourism, J1. Awesome. So, friends, the good news, if this is your first time hanging out with the Chai and Coaching, we have covered videos on every one of these single topics. We've done specific videos. We have a whole visa interview playlist. I know Mandy as well on her channel has done a lot of great videos and on their social media. So if you have a specific visa type, um, there's free content out there that you guys can watch, benefit from, learn from. So yeah, just want to make sure that that's available to you guys more than just these live sessions that we do. So yeah, keep sharing. Yeah, so there's a lot of great free resources on social media. I shared the links in the video description in the chat a little bit ago, and also some of the cool courses that they do that we'll talk a little bit more later. But let's keep rolling. With Trump 2.0 and the new administration, Mandy, why is preparation more important now than ever, especially for a visa interview?
Yeah, I think, if you're in a webinar like this, clearly you're someone who cares about your future and whether or not you're successful at the visa interview. And so now is really a time for you to prepare in advance because you want to differentiate yourself from all of the other people applying for visas, right? You know, Even though there's no quotas for whether or not a visa officer approves or denies a certain amount of people, they do have people that they deny every single day. And you want to make sure that you're doing well enough so that you're prepared for the interview and you're someone that makes it easy for the visa officer to approve. I've said this on previous sessions with Rob, but your job in this process really is to make the job of the visa officer as easy as possible to approve your
Mm-hmm.
visa. And how you do that is by being prepared because so many people go into the interview, and I know this because I interviewed so many people, not prepared or not even listening to the question or giving one word answers, which is a big no no. And so you want to have that context and have that understanding of what this interview is all about, what it represents, what are they looking for, what types of responses would be helpful to them in making that very important decision, especially because you only have a few minutes. And now, under this new president who can be very anti um, visa approvals and anti immigration, that's why preparation now is more important. The process is about to become tougher, so you want to make sure that you're prepared for whatever happens. And this is actually the reason why my partner and I started the ZF Visa Guides, which are these online courses. We have one for the F1 student visa, and we have one for the B1, B2 visitor visa because we wanted to help as many people as possible understand the process. And we simply didn't have enough time to do all the one on one sessions in the world with everyone. And so if you take our course, it gives you hours of information, all important for you to know before your visa interview day. From, how do you answer the first question and what is expected to come up? How do you talk about your financial situation and whether or not you have a sponsor and who's sponsoring you? How do you talk about if you've had a visa denial before? How do you turn the situation around? How can you address what happened before in your denial and turn it into an approval? And all of those things are in our courses and even more. And the best thing is if you purchase the full course, which we're about to give one of those right away. So please stay so that you can enter into the lottery. Um, you actually also get access to either me or my partner in exclusive one on one sessions with a former visa officer where you can ask your custom questions, or if you want to do mock interviews, we do that in the session. And then that way, you can learn from our process, our years spent behind the visa window in helping you understand how officers make this very important decision. Because the thing is, so many people never even get to start on their visa journey. They never get to come to the US because they can't get their visas approved. So with the situation as tough as it is now under the current administration, you want to do everything you can to help yourself. And it starts with just learning about the visa process and learning about how to tackle it in the smartest and most efficient way possible, because you only have a few minutes to talk to the visa officer.
Yeah, and your best chance to get approved with a visa interview is the first time. That's why preparing for the first time is so important. Having a denial or rejection is really hard to come back from. Um, it's possible, but it's way harder. If you show up with the rejection, they're most likely just going to reject you again because they're going to trust the judgment from the previous visa officer. So that first time, that's when the prep matters the most. Getting coaching, doing mock interview practice, getting the right tools and resources so you're 100% confident, you know what to say, you know how to conduct yourself, your documents are in the right way. So there's no chance, no doubt that the visa officer has any unclarity that would cause them to have suspicion and say, no, we're not going to mess with this today. So that
Yeah.
prep is so important.
You're absolutely right, Rob. And, basically every single time you go in for your visa interview, anything you say is recorded down and stays in the US government system forever. So that's what Rob's talking about. When you make a mistake, it stays in the system forever. So even if you go back for a future interview, that officer will have access to the previous officer's notes, which is why the stakes are so high. I always tell people the best time to prepare for your US visa interview is before your first interview. The second best time to prepare is now, before your next interview. I know for some of you, if you've been denied a visa before, you did not come across this channel and did not come across our videos, you didn't even know that you had to prepare, and that's totally okay. There's been lots of people who have taken our online courses who have been denied visas before, and after fully understanding and taking that time and investing in themselves to prepare the right way, they've been approved. And they've sent us amazing testimonials and reviews, and it just makes us so happy to know that our course is actually making a big difference for those of you who are, doing their best to prepare and to do things the right way.
Yeah. So I'll say, yeah, if you guys want to protect against denials, if you want to make your communication more smooth, or a lot of you guys have complicated situations. I read most of the comments on our YouTube videos, I read your messages on LinkedIn and Instagram, and some of you guys have some very complicated situations with family, work, things in the process, things that happened in the past. It's not just a simple one-time student visa interview. And so if you have a complicated process, that's going to be even more high risk, more red flag for a visa officer. So again, getting that preparation, the coaching from a behind the scenes expert. And for these courses, we give you guys a 10% discount. So use Rob Chai. Mandy's very generous, giving you guys a little bit of a discount to get those. We've shared the link for those courses, but those can really help you out. And we want to make it a little bit cheaper for you too. So there's an F1 visa course. There's a B1-2 visa course for tourist and work visas or business visas. And so, yeah, they've helped so many people. They're self-guided. You get access for more Q&A stuff. So highly recommend it. Yeah, I think appreciate your guys' hard work to create these resources to help people be best prepared.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rob. It means the world to us, not only that people are taking the course, but that they actually get approved their visas. And sometimes this is my favorite part. We get students of our course that come to our Q&A sessions and will wait to the very end just to thank us because they've been approved their visas. They sit through everybody else's questions just to tell us in person that they've been approved. And I think those are always my favorite moments to know that this is really making an impact. And if you purchase the course, you can basically rewatch the lessons, go back to the complicated portions that you need help on, and then you can sit in on our exclusive Q&A. And sometimes when I initially started the course, when people were purchasing and just trusting us, which we don't take that lightly, I think the students that were in our Q&As, they just would be so lucky because they would be the only person in the Q&A, and they would get like an entire hour of time to like talk to me or talk to Travis about their situation. It's really like a 1 hour free consultation. So in those sessions, I think it's been very helpful to students to be able to talk about issues they don't understand or a specific complicating factor in their situation. And it really is a cost-effective way for you guys to prepare for your visa interview.
Yeah. And to say thanks for being here, we're going to do a giveaway and give away one of these courses. So to participate, you guys need to put the phrase hashtag visa help, all connected, in the comments, and that's going to register you guys for the giveaway. So put hashtag visa help as you see there on the screen, and we're going to do a fun giveaway. So let me share my screen. There you go. You guys are doing it right. And just do it one time. It's only going to count once. Multiple entries are not going to help you guys. So don't worry about that. Just do it one time. It will be counted.
Oh, great.
Okay. So hashtag visa help. So as you guys see it there on the screen, we'll give you guys 20, 30 seconds. And again, this is a $300 value. You can choose whether you want the F1 course, the B1, B2 course, to help be best prepared for these really common, but sometimes trickier than you think, US visas. So hashtag visa help. Just do it one time. It's only going to count you one time. 10 more seconds to get entered. Thanks so much for being here. We guys appreciate you being part of the community, taking time to learn. And yeah, we love helping you guys get success. And this is another way to do that. Okay.
Rob,
Five.
does it matter?
Oh,
I
go.
was just
Well,
going
yeah.
to say, I'm noticing from people's comments, sometimes it's in all caps and sometimes it's not. Does it matter if they write it in all caps or not?
I don't think the caps matters. Just they just
Okay.
need visa help. So yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. So make sure, yeah, it's hashtag visa help. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Let's see who our lucky winner is. Awesome. Johnny, Anita, congratulations. Friends, tell her congrats in the comments. Johnny, if you can share your email address with me or Mandy, we'll make sure we'll get you access to that course. So thanks for everyone participating. Yeah, so we'll be doing these every time we go live. So make sure you guys tune in for our live sessions. But now, appreciate your guys' patience. We're going to head into the live Q&A now. This is where we want to answer your questions. So a couple ground rules. Please ask your questions one time. If you ask them again and again and fill up the chat, I'm not going to pick those. Answer with full questions. Make sure you write complete sentences, use a question mark, make sure we have all the details. If you need to break it up into 2 questions, that's okay. And then we're going to prioritize super chats. So we can't get to everybody. If you have a burning question you want Mandy to address today, make sure it's a super chat, and that'll kind of bump to the front of the queue for all the questions we're going to answer today. So let's get through as many questions as we can. And again, Johnny, thank you so much. Congrats. Please reach out to us with your contact info, and we'll hook you up with that course. So, all right. So yeah, please start sharing your questions, and we're going to help you guys out with those. So let me scroll back here a little bit and try and find some good ones. Okay, this is a good one. Mandy and I actually made a video on this earlier as well, but Mo's asking, can you talk about admin processing 221G and how one can prevent on renewal? Is it previously placed on but visa approved?
Okay. So, Mo, that's a great question. If you've had to go through the administrative processing process before, it sometimes you're able to go through the renewal process. What happens is if you're eligible for it, you'll be able to turn everything in to the visa officer and they'll review. They'll also look at your previous situation, and if it was a one-time administrative processing issue, maybe they were just missing some paperwork, or there was something that they didn't understand about your case, which you were able to overcome and approved, then a lot of times they'll just allow the renewal to proceed. Now, if it's something like where you were required to fill out a DS-5535 form and that takes kind of months to process, or perhaps you previously had a visa ineligibility and then you got a waiver, unfortunately, you probably won't qualify for renewal and you'll have to go through the interview process again. And so, all that to say is that there are many different types of administrative processing. Sometimes if it's a one-time issue, you can get renewed without another interview. Other times you might have to go back in for another interview, in which case you want to be prepared for that visa interview and particularly prepared to address what happened previously to have caused you to go into administrative processing.
Great. Um, all right. Jyoti's saying, single from India, working as an IT trainer. Dad has a green card and brother's a citizen. Happy, with job, has property back there in India. Any tips
Mhm.
or guidance when you've got family who have some, visas and attachment to America?
Yeah. So, Jyoti, this is a great question. I think anytime someone has what's called significant ties to the US, perhaps you have a lot of family there, perhaps they're American citizens or green card holders, it will definitely impact whether or not you can easily get a visa. It's usually not considered a good thing if someone has lots of family in the US. So I think from this point, it's really important that when you go in for your visa interview, that you're very clear about number one, how your family members immigrated to the US so the officer knows that they immigrated legally to the US. For example, it might be, oh yeah, my father, first got transferred to the US on an L1 visa, and eventually the company found him so valuable they decided to petition for a green card for him. And my brother was born over there. So that's point number one, how your family members in the US actually immigrated there. The second thing that's important to emphasize in this case is to talk about your relationship with your family members and why is it that they're over there and you're over here. So it could be something as simple as, my parents got divorced when I was really young, and now I'm going for a conference. And even though I have a dad and a brother over there, we don't really talk and we really haven't been in touch for a really long time, right? So giving context to that, or perhaps talking about how your parents live in a separated lifestyle, and your dad has already gone over there, but you rarely see him. And if you do plan to see him, just be honest about it. I think that's something that visa officers really appreciate is when you're direct and you're honest. And I think sometimes people are so fearful that what they say is not going to be okay that they end up not telling the truth. The worst thing you can do at a visa interview is be dishonest, and that can actually earn you a permanent ban from the United States. So you always want to be honest at your visa interview.
Great. Here's a good question from Nima. Uh, During the visa interview, are you free to choose your language?
Yes, you are free to choose your language, but there's a couple of caveats. So if you're applying for an F1 student visa, 99% of the time, your interview will be in English. And if you don't speak any English, you will probably have a difficult time getting approved for your F1 visa. This is because visa officers want to make sure that you have the proper qualifications to actually attend class in the US. And what they're thinking, if you don't speak any English, is how are you going to take classes at a US university if you can't even have a short conversation in English? Now, for a B1, B2 visitor visa, it's much more acceptable to only speak your native tongue. Perhaps you're just going for vacation. The visa officer is not going to expect you to speak English for that interview. But if you do, sometimes it's a good idea to be able to just use that in your interview so that you can show the visa officer that you're someone who is educated, you have resources, you clearly had the ability to learn English in your home country. And so usually that's seen as a positive factor anytime you can speak English at a US visa interview.
Great. Okay. Yogesh is asking, nowadays, India has the most US visa rejections in 2025. What's the reason behind that? Most people are facing rejections. One of my friends was rejected 3 times, another friend rejected twice. How
Mm,
should people understand that, Mandy?
yeah. You know, I think the statistics do show that, but there are just so many people who want to come to the US to study or to travel. And so I think lack of preparation is probably the number one reason why people are denied. If out of the crowds, most people are not prepared for the interview, but you're the one person that is prepared and know exactly how to conquer the first question and how to start your conversation with the visa officer, that immediately gives you a leg up on everybody else. And so I think proper preparation is really the key. And so many people don't even realize that they're not prepared. They just assume that this is something that they can walk into. It's a rubber stamp. They're definitely going to get their visa. And many are shocked to learn that no, you actually have to know how to properly communicate with a visa officer.
Yeah, and I would say just from my observation in India, at least from my relationships there, a lot of people have other people help them with the visa interview process, like agents to do the paperwork, to book the slots. So if you're outsourcing someone else to kind of do this visa interview prep, you might not know all the information or details, and you're probably maybe even getting bad advice on how to prepare for the visa interview. So just be very careful of that. And the more you do it yourself, the better prepared you're going to be. So make sure you take the responsibility for that.
Yeah, thanks so much for saying that, Rob, because I think I've even had so many clients come to me and say, well, the agent made a mistake on my DS 160 form and they wrote this when it's really that. One important thing to know is whatever you put down on the DS 160 application form, the officer will hold you responsible, even if it was an agent filling it in. And so you might as well do it yourself because only you really know your personal situation. And these visa agents, they do so many applications in a day. Sometimes they're not as detailed as they should be. And so if there's a mistake that is caught, let's just say one of my clients recently, the visa agent helping them didn't bother asking them if they had any family members in the US. And so to that question, they wrote no, no family in the US, when in actuality, he did have immediate family members in the US. And to the visa officer, that's going to seem like you're intentionally trying to lie to them and you could get in big trouble. So
Hmm.
always, always, always do your best to do it yourself. If you are using an agent, definitely review everything before you submit it because you are going to be the person held responsible for your answers.
Yeah. Ruby's question here is been denied an F2 visa 3 times. Husband's doing fully funded PhD. The third denial, the visa officer asking why we got married 2 months after he got his visa. How can she help fix this?
Yeah, so this is a great question, Ruby, and this seems to give us a hint as to what they're caught up on. So since you got married after he got his visa, I think they might not be sure of your relationship. So one way you can overcome this is by volunteering information about your relationship so that they can take that into consideration. For example, at your next visa interview, you can, instead of waiting for them to ask you a question, you can say something like, yeah, I know that we got married 2 months after he got his visa, but in actuality, we've been dating for more than 2 years. the first time we met was in this location, and then here's where we went on our first date. And then bring some photos of you and your spouse throughout the years so that we know that this is not what they're worried about, and what they're suspicious of is that this was a marriage for convenience so that you can get a visa. So you have to dispel that story in their head by showing them accurate information and telling them about your relationship. And sometimes you have to be forceful and volunteer that information as much as you can, because they might not ask it, but it doesn't mean they're not thinking it in their heads.
Great. I really like this question. We have a Muslim friend here, and their passport photo has a hijab, and on the form photo is without it. So, planning to attend the interview without the hijab. Any problems with that, or any just thoughts again on how people look, dress, and match in the pictures with their interviews? Because I've had some other
Yeah,
questions and comments asking about if someone wears a hijab or a head covering, will that impact their visa interview?
yeah. It shouldn't. I actually think for this particular question, your DS-160 form photo doesn't have it. If you attend the interview without a hijab, that's totally fine. But if you're from a country where it's very common for people to wear hijabs to their visa interview, it should not be an issue. And when you get to the consulate or the embassy that day, they will give you further instruction. So don't worry too much about it. They understand that this is something that people do for cultural and religious reasons, so it won't be held against you.
Great. So, Johnny, our giveaway winner, says, my uncle is sending a letter invitation to me, but my company is sponsoring me. Do I still need to show a bank statement? And do I have a chance of being accepted? Her only economic tie is having land property back home.
Mm,
So, with uncle sending a letter, company sponsoring, what kind of
mhm.
documents or proof are helpful, especially for home ties besides
Yeah.
the property they have?
Yeah. So, Johnny, I think one important thing for you to have is being able to properly explain your ties. That I would say is actually even more important than any document that you can bring. For some of you who've already had these interviews, you know that visa officers are really busy. They really don't like documents. They don't like to look through documents. And so, what I always tell people is bring everything, but don't be surprised if they don't look at it. Um, so the best way to conquer this process is to be able to, in a very short, concise, and compelling way, talk about how you're being sponsored by your company. I've been working with my company for this many years, and they're sponsoring me to attend this conference because it's going to be very helpful to my work and to the company's bottom line, right? That I go to this conference. Um, I have an uncle who lives in the US. He actually went to the US many years ago on a student visa and ended up, getting an H-1B visa. Anytime you talk about a family member, it's really important to share with the visa officer how that family member immigrated to the US. You have to volunteer that information. Oftentimes, they won't ask you. And so, Johnny, I would say bring your bank statement. If they ask you for it, then you have it ready to go, but they probably won't look at it. And the better way to do it is talk about your relationship with your company. What do you do for them? What are your responsibilities so that they would understand why it makes sense for the company to sponsor you to go to the US?
Great. I've seen some questions about, are there changes for visa interviews under Trump? That's something we covered earlier in this session. So you guys can go back and catch the recording on that. We're not going to cover that one here since we talked about that earlier in the session. But Deep, we got a two-part question here. He was refused for a bachelor's student visa 4 years ago. Did his bachelor's um, in his home country, now going to Northeastern University, Boston for master's in nanomedicine, has worked on improving his profile. Since then, he's also published research papers and a book and bachelor degree. So yeah, tips or suggestions for someone who's maybe rejected for a bachelor's, now trying for a master's and improve their profile.
Yeah, so deep. That sounds awesome that I'm sure you've done a lot of work for your bachelor's degree and now you're getting into your master's program. I think one thing that would be really helpful at your next visa interview is talking about, why exactly this school for your degree? Does it specialize in nanomedicine? Are there professors there that you would love to study under? I think anything specific and personal that draws you to that school would be really helpful. And you were denied 4 years ago, so it has been a significant amount of time, and clearly your situation has changed. So I would say, just be prepared for that F1 interview to be able to talk about your financial situation, talk about why this degree is important to you. Um, that would be my best recommendation for you since you've had a previous visa denial, but enough time has passed that hopefully you'll be able to get your visa approved this time. Consider taking our F1 course because it really goes into how to talk about from the very first question, how to
Hmm.
share all of the positive information from your situation to the visa officer.
Good suggestion. I like this one from Grace or Gracie. I filled out my mom's DS-160 for B1, B2 that she had never been denied a visa, and yet I guess maybe found out later that she's had 2 visa denials back in 2011. How can they correct the mistake? Or, what does someone need to do to fix or correct a DS-160?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I would highly recommend that you fix that mistake because otherwise they're going to think that your mom is intentionally trying to lie to them, and they'll be able to see immediately from the system that she has had previous visa denials. Um, If you fill out another DS-160, sometimes you can go into your account for scheduling a visa appointment and just update the number from your new DS-160 so that the new one that you fill out will be associated with the profile, and that'll be the one that pulls up when they go into their visa interview. That's what I would recommend. If you're not able to do that, because sometimes the system is a little bit finicky and it doesn't always allow you to do that, then I would bring in an updated DS-160 and just have your mom show it to the intake person before they actually get to the interview with the officer, and just have them volunteer the information. Hey, my daughter helped me fill out this form, but she didn't know I had 2 visa denials. I've tried fixing it. I wasn't able to do that in the system. Can you help me? And let the visa officer know. That's going to be really important.
Great. Oh, here's another good question from Vina. Is travel history to other countries mandatory for visa approval? I don't have any travel history, just only travel in her home country of India. So, how much of a factor does travel history have, Mandy?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bina. So, travel history is one factor that the visa officer looks at. So, if you do have a lot of international travels, that definitely improves your situation, but it doesn't mean you can't get a visa if you haven't traveled anywhere. It's just one factor they look at. They look at a lot of different things, but that also means that you kind of have to strengthen your application in other respects. Perhaps you're going for a student visa and you were considering studying in the UK or the US, and you decided on the US for these reasons. This is the school you selected. Here's why. What do your parents do for work? How are they going to sponsor you? Are they well to do? These are all things that a visa officer looks at. So, because you don't have any international travel history, you want to be extra prepared on the other aspects of your case so that you're still a very strong contender for getting your visa approved.
Great. Mandy, we've just crossed over an hour length in our session today. How much more time do you have for answering some more questions?
Maybe let's do another 5 minutes.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Let's see if we can help this friend here. Um, Someone has applied for an F1 visa 3 times, all self-funded. First time on conditional admission, then was rejected in Dubai, Oman, and Armenia with admission to Iowa State, all getting 214B. This friend is from Iran. Um, yeah, what problems or what could be going on here? What?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So, whenever you get denied a visa, I generally recommend if you didn't prepare for that first interview, go back, prepare. Either you can take our course or look at our free resources, but just do something different than you did in your first interview. Now, instead of going to a different consulate, I would actually recommend most of the time to go back to your same consulate. The reason why I say that is because sometimes visa officers suspect that once you've been denied a visa, if you try going somewhere else, you're really shopping around for an easier consulate to get your visa approved. And they really hate that practice. And so
Hmm.
they're suspicious of that. And so the best way to do it is actually to go back to your same consulate as before. You're not going to get the same officer because the State Department actually has an internal rule that when you go in for another interview, you have to get a new officer. It can't be the same officer who denied you previously. So you don't have to worry about that. And this time you'll be more prepared. Now, if you have a good reason to apply somewhere else, like maybe Sina has a important reason. Maybe she couldn't get a visa appointment in Dubai, and so she had to go to Oman or Armenia. Well, you want to make sure that you share that reason immediately with the visa officer, even if they don't ask you, just so they're aware that there were other extenuating factors that caused you to get an appointment somewhere else. And so I don't, without knowing more information about your case, Sina, I don't know exactly why you're being denied, but just looking at your history of interviewing in different consulates, my concern is that they're probably worried that you're shopping around. And so you want to kind of change that perspective for the visa officer by letting them know your reasons for going to different places, assuming that you have good reasons for doing that.
Sounds good. Um, let's see. Aditya is saying they applied for a B1, B2 visa from Dublin while a student there, was ill advised and have two rejections over a period of 1 month in August of 2020. Now they're back in Bangalore, India. What kind of chances would they have?
Yeah. So, there are so many reasons for visa denials. Just these facts don't tell me that, you know, that they had a good reason to deny you. Generally, if you're going to school in Europe, that's actually seen as a positive factor.
Hmm.
So, this might have something to do with how you communicate with the visa officer, how you answer the questions, whether or not you shared information that was what they were looking for. And so I would highly recommend that you do some preparation. And if you do decide to apply again in India, make sure that you're ready for the interview this time. Rob has tons of resources on his channel. We have a YouTube channel called ZF Visa. You can go back and watch some of our videos on previous visa denials just to help yourself understand what you can do. I'm sorry about the denials. I hope you get approved next time.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question. Udanov's asking, they've got two different jobs. One started a few months ago, one they've been working 8 years. Is the duration of your jobs or the type of jobs you're working in your home country going to be a red flag at all, especially for home ties?
Yeah, I think so. Generally, when a visa officer looks at jobs, they do look at the length of time you've been working somewhere. And so, 5 months is not a very long time. And so, in your case, I would probably prioritize the job that you've had for 8 years and just focus on that instead of saying, oh, I also had this other job for 5 months, because for the most part, you want to keep things simple. You don't want to offer too much information, especially if the additional information isn't helpful to your case. Only share the information that is positive for your case.
Great. And I like this one too. Nature vibes. What if someone has a relative in the US the first time they applied for a B1, B2, but not in contact with them anymore? Can you put that you don't have relatives there? Or how should people think about answering the relatives questions on the DS 160?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So visa officers really appreciate consistency across applications. So if you previously put on your visa application that you have family in the US, then you want to, unless you were denied and they were asking you lots of questions about that family, it's always a good idea to just be consistent and make sure that your application looks the same as last time. Because it's very likely that they will go into your previous application. And if they see that you previously said you had someone and now you don't, they're going to ask you about that and wonder if this is, are you being dishonest? So that's one issue. Um, so in terms of answering that question, you always have to be honest, but you can offer more of an explanation at your visa interview. So in this case, if the question comes up about your uncle, or sorry, you didn't say uncle, your relative, you can let them know, like, we actually don't talk anymore. We had a falling out, and give some specifics. Details are really important. Don't be vague.
Great. Okay. I think that's gonna wrap us up here. Friends, I hope this was helpful. Mandy, you did awesome. So many questions. Thank you for hanging out with us on Valentine's. I hope that, as maybe you're looking for romance friends, that you can also find that visa you're looking for and adventure in America. So thanks for joining us today. We appreciate your participation, your great questions. If it didn't get answered, put it in the comments of this video. I'll try and follow up and respond or share links. We have a lot of great resources going to help you out. So again, say cheers and thanks to Mandy, and appreciate you guys hanging out today.
Thanks, everyone. It was so great to answer all of your questions. I wish you the best on your US visa journey.
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good weekend. See you next time.